And now, back to the Jennifer Fulwiler Show.
It's really fun, and yeah.
Here's Jennifer.
Well, that's good news.
Jen Fulwiler, so delighted to have you with me here this afternoon. Come say hello at thejfshow.com. I would absolutely love to hear from you. And you know what? One of my big issues when I came from atheism into the Catholic Church was this whole issue of gay marriage, gay lifestyles, that kind of thing, because I have a lot of dear friends who are living gay lifestyles. I'm very close to them. I think they're wonderful. They're some of the best people I've ever met. And so I'd heard these rumors, these stereotypes that the Catholic Church is hateful of gay people or believes that, they can pray the gay away, like say a few prayers and then they'll just, be in traditional Christian marriages and everything will be fine. And that was a big stumbling block in me coming into the Catholic Church. But then once I read the big picture of the Catholic view of human sexuality, not just, narrowly looking at this one issue, but the big picture, it ended up impacting my own life as a married woman. And I actually saw that what Christ has given us through the teachings of his church is actually something very difficult, but very beautiful. And that is why I'm so interested in the Courage Ministry. I think it's absolutely wonderful. I love it that they have these conferences. I will let my guest here, Father Philip Bochanski, tell you a little bit more about it. But he heads up Courage. He does a lot of good work with them. You can look them up at couragerc.org. And I can't wait to chat with him about what's new with them. Father Philip, welcome back to the Jennifer Fulwiler Show.
Well, thank you, Jennifer. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Yeah, I'm so glad that you're back. And, it's been a little while, Father Philip, since you've been on the show. So before we talk about some great stuff you guys have coming up with the Encourage Conference and what you guys do as part of the Courage Ministry, let's just take a couple steps back and review for people who might not be familiar exactly what the church believes about people who are, attracted to people of the same sex, like just clearing up a couple of the misconceptions. Like we don't believe in the, pray the gay away model, as some people would say. We don't believe that people are sinful just for having those inclinations. Could you kind of give us the thumbnail sketch of what the church would say to someone with same-sex attraction?
Sure. Well, traditionally, the church's teaching is kind of built on a three-part model. We talk about the person, that person's feelings or inclinations, and that person's free choices and actions. And as far as people who experience same-sex attraction, who they are as individuals, as persons, we believe the same thing about them as we believe about every human being, that our identity is founded on the fact that we're created in the image and likeness of God, which means that we're created to be in loving relationships, and that we're created male and female by God's design. And so our sexuality has a purpose and there's a plan to it, and that we find our true identity not by identifying with sexual attractions or any other part of our experience, but in understanding what it means to be created in the image and likeness of God and called to holiness and called to relationship with him. So that's the person is always good, and the person's identity is situated in our creation. Our desires are natural gifts from God, but because of the fact of original sin and the long history of human sin, we don't take our desires at face value. We have to judge our emotions and our attractions and our desires as to whether they're leading us to something that's truly good or whether they're leading us to something that's evil. And so the church looks at same-sex attractions and says, well, they're leading to a type of sexual intimacy that we can't say is moral because it's lacking certain essential characteristics of God's plan for sexual intimacy. So the attraction is not good in itself. It's not a gift from God to have that attraction, but it's not a sin to experience that attraction either. Our emotions are what they are. Our attractions, our desires, we're generally not in conscious control of our emotional reactions. We do have to be responsible about how we, whether we put ourselves in the occasion to be tempted, et cetera. But simply to experience same-sex attractions is not a sin, and no one's condemned for the experience of those attractions. But then we do have to make good moral judgments on human actions. And when we look at any kind of sexual intimacy that a person might be inclined to pursue, we judge it by God's plan for sexuality. Is it based on complementarity of the sexes? Is it part of a permanent and faithful relationship that we recognize as marriage? Is it open to the transmission of new life? And so the church looks at homosexual intimacy and says, well, there's not that complementarity of the body so that the two can become one flesh. There's not that complementarity of the spirit that we see in the way that men and women are different and kind of draw each other out of themselves towards the other. And there's not an openness to the transmission of new life. And so for those reasons, we say it's not part of God's plan for sexuality. It's not part of the order of creation and the proper ordering of human sexuality. So a person's always good. A person's inclinations might be leading in the wrong direction, but that doesn't mean the person is completely bad because just for feeling those attractions. But we have to make good judgments and say we ought not to pursue actions that are lacking complementarity and procreativity.
Yeah, and Father Philip, I'm so glad that you clarified that, and I can't wait to ask you about the Encourage conference that you guys just had. I can't wait to hear all about that and what kind of things were discussed there. But I think it's also important, as you're talking about that kind of thing, is that one thing that is a fairly uniquely Catholic view. I mean, I know that in the Protestant and evangelical world, you don't see quite as much of this understanding of the big picture of human sexuality, which is that, with the way the church sees it, like you said, you gave the list of all the criteria that any sort of sexual act should meet. And there are people who are, to use labels, which are problematic, but let's say heterosexual, quote unquote, in a traditional Christian marriage, that kind of thing, who have attractions, who would like to do things sexually with someone of the opposite sex, but it does not meet that criteria. Let's say it's not something that would be open to life. And again, this interview will be full of caveats because there's so much misunderstanding on the subject. The church doesn't believe that every single sexual act must lead toward a baby, but that openness is there. And, Father Philip, we've had guys like Matt Fradd coming on here talking primarily to married men married to women, who talk about pornography addiction, and that, men who fit the label of heterosexual have all sorts of inclinations that are not fully respectful of the sexual act. And that's one thing that I find refreshing about the Catholic view on this, is that it's not just saying, well, if you're attracted to the same sex, that is really problematic. But as long as your attractions are towards someone of the opposite sex, whatever you want to do is completely fine. That is not the view. The church would say that everyone has a cross that they need to carry in the name of respecting human sexuality.
Well, not only that, but that every human being is called to chastity. And, I know that some of your listeners are frowning at that because we hear chastity and we think lonely life, no fun, no friends, no love. But on the contrary, chastity is authentic love, and it leads to freedom and leads to peace, because chastity is not repression. Chastity is integration of our desires into the big picture of who we are, right? So, yeah, every human being has desires, some of which are inspired by God and others of which are very problematic. And what the church is asking us in terms of virtue is not to just take our desires at face value, but to say, is this a desire that's leading me to be the man or woman that God is calling me to be? And so in terms of sexual desire, is this a desire that, is leading me to grow in my vocation and my commitment to my spouse? Or is this a desire that is leading me to be more selfish or self-centered? I think it's essential, as you say, to make sure that people know that our teaching on homosexuality is part of the bigger teaching on chastity, which is an obligation and an invitation, frankly, to every human being to learn how to love authentically by keeping our desires in their proper perspective.
Yeah, and you guys do so much great work through the Courage Ministry, which people can look up at couragerc.org. And, and I think another thing that we see in the Catholic view of sexuality, which includes both our understanding of what's appropriate within a marriage, what's appropriate for people who are attracted to the same sex, is that we really don't get hung up on labels about your sexuality. I mean, sometimes for the purpose of conversation, you need to use labels like homosexual, heterosexual, just for clarity. But in general, and this is very different from modern secular culture, we do not believe that those labels define you. And I remember, Father Philip, a long time ago, I was listening to one of those kind of raunchy talk radio stations. This was years ago, before my conversion, where people call in and they ask sexual questions. And I mean, I think my head would explode if I listened to that kind of thing now. But a young man called in and he had very much labeled himself heterosexual. Like, that's his label. He is attracted to women. And he started feeling some inclinations that were a little different from that, a little outside of those bounds. And it was leading him to this enormous, like, spiritual and mental crisis. And I think for someone who understands the big picture of church teaching of sexuality through the wisdom that God has given us through the Catholic Church, you don't need to get so hung up on those labels. I mean, you see God's plan for sexuality. You understand that, most people at some point in their lives are going to experience desires that are outside of that. And that's okay. And we just, we go to confession if we fall down, and it doesn't reflect on who you are as a human being. And Father Philip, in the great work that you do as part of the Courage Ministry, do you see people who are kind of weighed down by those labels of I'm gay or I'm straight or I'm bi? Like, do you see those labels impacting people?
Well, I think so, and I think that's why the church is asking us not to label people and not to encourage people to label themselves, because however a person means the label that they choose for themselves, we can't control how someone else is going to hear it, and especially today in the way that secular society thinks of these things. If you introduce yourself as I'm gay or I'm LGBT or whatever, then as far as other people are concerned, that often comes along with a list of expectations as to how you feel politically and what you think in terms of what the church teaches on the subject. And a lot of our members at Courage who are striving to just live chaste lives and do that in the context of this experience, they're saying that label doesn't fit me. I'm not looking for a partner. I'm not looking for a hookup. I'm just trying to understand what it is that God wants from me and how do I live chastely and find my vocation. So, yeah, I think we kind of know this instinctively in terms of other parts of life. We try to avoid bullying and stereotyping and calling people names and putting labels on other people. But for some reason, in terms of sexuality, there's this identity politics which has become so central to our civil discussion, and it really clouds the issue because it reduces a person and that person's experience to somebody else's categories, and it's just not useful in terms of understanding ourselves and understanding God's plan for us.
Yeah, I think that's such an important point. I really encourage people, even if they themselves aren't attracted to people of the same sex or don't know anyone who is, I still think everyone should look up what you're doing in the Courage Apostolate, and that is couragerc.org. And Father Philip, you guys recently had your Encourage conference, is that correct?
We did. We had our annual Courage and Encourage conference at Mundelein Seminary in Chicago. We had about 350 people come, and they represented, I think it was 8 countries on 4 continents. So,
wow.
Our conference it's kind of part family reunion and part retreat and part workshop, and just a really nice occasion to get the family together. It's some of our folks feel very isolated in their day-to-day lives, but they come to the conference, and some of them have been coming, for 30 years, and they meet old friends and make new friends, and it's a really, I think it's a manifestation of what the church is looking for when she says that, it's really impossible to live a chaste life without real friendships. So that's what we're striving to do.
I love that you do that. And again, people can see details about it at couragerc.org. And Father Philip, I think that's a real cross that comes if you are, to just use labels for the sake of understanding. If you identify as gay, part of the GLBT community, and that's your identity, as the secular world would say, like, yep, that label, that is just absolutely who you are. And if you have read up on the church teaching, you find it compelling, you would like to, live in accordance with God's plan for sexuality and all that sort of thing. In this modern day and age, when a lot of us do not live in close-knit parish communities. We don't live in close-knit family communities where, we're surrounded by the love of sisters and brothers and cousins and aunts and uncles, even if we ourselves don't end up getting married, that, a lot of people live in cultures where they're just kind of surrounded by support and love. And, our communities today, Father Philip, have really been atomized. I mean, so many of us are kind of lonely to begin with. And so I think a lot of people worry, if I have that attraction and I do go the route of saying, okay, I'm going to try to do what the church teaches, I think a lot of people really fear a life of loneliness. Is that true? Do you kind of see that fear a lot?
I think that's very true. I think that's part of the inspiration for the Courage apostolate. And, most of the work that we do in terms of direct pastoral care is through regular meetings in local diocesan chapters. So people meet with the chaplain and with other people who are sharing their experience. And so what a number of our Courage members who have maybe been involved in homosexual relationships or looking for connections in that way, when they do come back to church and embrace the faith, they tell us they lose a lot of their friends in the gay world, so to speak. People just don't understand, why they're striving for chastity. So Courage, in a way, is kind of a landing pad for people who are looking for community and looking to see, all right, here are people that understand what I'm going through and are supportive of what I'm trying to do in my life in terms of living chastely and growing in my relationship with the Lord. And I think the importance of chaste friendship can't be overstated, because our friends are kind of, they're mirrors for ourselves. Our friends have the ability to see things in us that we don't see in ourselves. And so when you live in a culture, especially for young people today, where it says, your value and your worth is in your attractiveness and your sexual desirability and availability. That's why people, want to spend time with you. If you're asking someone to live chastely, they want to know, well, why would anybody want to be my friend? Why would anybody be interested in me? And so to have a community where we can build friendships based on that shared goal of growing in relationship with Jesus and that shared goal of chastity is so important in terms of just helping people to understand the gifts they've been given and the call that they have from the Lord to follow Him and to serve Him.
I love that. And are there ways that people who are part of the Courage ministry, the Courage community, that obviously you guys have your great Encourage conferences, and again, people can find out more about it at couragerc.org. And do you guys have any sort of online groups or other ways that you mentioned you had people coming from, what was it, 8 countries, 4 continents, something like that, to the last event? Is there a way that these friendships can kind of be maintained through online connections, through social media, to sort of, online interaction is always going to be not as good as in-person interaction, but do you see the members of Courage kind of taking those steps to connect and just,
Sure.
try to solve that loneliness a little bit?
We do have a number of online groups. They've been around for a while, so they're Yahoo groups, actually, which is maybe not the most up-to-date technology, but they've been going for many years. And there's kind of a general Courage group. There's a general group for Encourage, which is our group for parents and siblings and spouses and other loved ones who are trying to keep the faith and keep good connections, bonds of communication with their loved one who identifies as gay or lesbian. And then there are more specified groups. We have an online group called Ladies of Courage, and one for Courage Young Adults, one for Encourage Spouses. I was really happy at our conference this year. We had a breakout session that we called Courage Under 30, and we interpreted that loosely. There were some over 30s there, but basically to get together with our young adult members, some of whom don't have a lot of peer support where they are, to see, how can we improve our outreach to young adults and the ways that they're connected, and how do we kind of keep those connections going through the year. So we started the discussion at the conference. We'll be continuing, but I think as we're moving forward, we're going to be revamping our website and making those kind of opportunities even more available.
I love that. Well, and Father Philip, we're about out of time, but just kind of a final comment. One of the reasons I'm always talking about courage, always promoting what you all do, is that I think that we need a wider education among Catholics generally to really help equip all of us to have a little bit of a healthy backlash towards this culture that says if you can't quote unquote express yourself sexually in every way you might possibly want to, whether that's with a heterosexual couple using contraception or, someone living a lifestyle that's, based on their sexuality, our culture would say, well, that's just too much sacrifice. You can't be happy. And what I've seen through, the married couples I know who use natural family planning, even when it involves a lot of personal sacrifice, friends I've known who are attracted to the same sex and are, they're part of Courage or not, or just, living according to church teaching, what everyone says unanimously is it's hard. It's really hard. This is a difficult teaching. I mean, no one would ever make light of that. But if you really seek to understand it and ask for God's grace and really bring God into this, you will find more joy than you could have ever expected. And again, that is true for married couples as well as it is for single people in Courage or whatever who are living chastely. And Father Philip, does that kind of jibe with your experience as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, remember, I've been ordained for 19 years, which means I made a promise to be celibate when I was 24 years old.
Right.
We priests know about those sacrifices as well, and I always tell our Courage chaplains and the priests that I'm able to talk to throughout the year, the biggest obstacle to presenting the church's teaching on chastity is grumpy celibates. Right? Like if I'm grouchy about it, why would anybody want to do it? So I tell them, fathers, if you're grumpy celibate, you've got to get happy, because we have to convince the world that a life without sexual intimacy is not a life without love. And that, in fact, chastity leads us to authentic friendship and freedom and peace of mind and heart and real strong relationships, family, friends, parish, and all those connections. I think this is the gift that's been given to the church for our time. People who are living joyfully the virtue of chastity in whatever their state in life, whatever their vocation may be. The people in the world are going to reject that, but the truth is attractive. And at some point they're going to say, I keep making fun of these people, but they keep living their life and they keep seeming happy. What do they know that I don't know? So whatever state in life your listeners are in, I hope that they're living the virtue of chastity and that they're showing people at every chance they can how it makes them happy, because that's how we'll convince the world to understand God's plan for sexuality and to embrace it and to live it out.
I love it. Well, Father Philip, it has been an absolute pleasure to chat with you. As always, I hope you will come back again soon and tell us about any new things that Courage has going on. And in the meantime, tell us where people can find you all online.
So we're at couragerc.org is our website for our members and potential members. And we just started a new website called truthandlove.com. That's all spelled out, which is a resource library for people, especially people in ministry, who want to learn more about where the church's teaching is coming from, how to understand it and present it compassionately. So couragerc.org and truthandlove.com.
All right, Father Philip, thank you so much. We hope to chat with you again soon, and keep up the great work.
Thanks, Jen. It's been a pleasure.
All right, take care. And we will be back with more after this here on The Jennifer Fulwiler Show.